Hello and welcome back to Bite Size Boxing. So I just want to do a little post-fight review for Tyrell Herndon versus Deontay Wilder. Of course, I did preview this fight of sorts, and I've heard a lot of people talking about it afterwards, and there's been a lot of sort of people saying things like Wilder looks completely shot, Wilder looks done, Wilder needs to retire, and then I've also heard people saying, well, he was a bit, rusty, but he didn't look that bad. So I want to sort of go into this with an open mind, and I've just gone and watched the fight, and I'll give you my thoughts. I think, as with many things, when you have two sort of extremes, the truth lies somewhere kind of in the middle. And in this fight, it kind of feels that way. So don't get it twisted. I said in my pre-fight, if it goes outside of 3 rounds, that Wilder, we can stick a fork in him. And it did. It went 7. That being said, I don't necessarily think Wilder is in his prime anymore. I don't think he's anywhere near his prime. But it wasn't the most disastrous performance in the world, when you apply certain context anyway. So I've got a couple of little notes with me. I mean, positives were that, his jab looked very good. His jab was pretty good. He's used his jab in fights before, mainly in that first Berman-Stavern fight. He sort of won that fight on the jab. So Wilder's always had a good jab to fall back on. And in this fight, it was the same. He, boxed behind the jab and in parts looked okay. Now, there were definitely a lot of drawbacks, and I think the age is definitely catching up to Wilder. For me, his feet looked a lot slower than what we're used to seeing, even compared to the recent fights against Parker. However, what I will say is another positive for Wilder is, although it took 7 rounds to get rid of Herndon, Wilder's never been a good person when it comes to chasing a fight. If you look at Wilder when he does best, it's when people come towards him. So even, for example, recently when he knocked out Helenius, 3 or 4 years ago, he beat Helenius when Helenius was on the front foot. If you come towards Wilder, he can get his shots off. If he's got to go chasing a person and cutting the ring off, that's not what Wilder likes to do. And because of the amount of movement that Herndon was employing and just constant, on his feet and on his bike, really not really engaging all that much, Wilder really struggled. And so, with all due respect, although this took 7 rounds to get rid of Herndon, we've seen this before. I think Artur Szpilka took him late doing sort of similar tactics anyway, and that was a prime Wilder. So when a fighter employs these kind of tactics against Wilder, he does tend to struggle. So the fact it went 7 rounds in and of itself, although it doesn't look good, that isn't necessarily a massive indicator that he's shot. However, there were other drawbacks, and I've got some of them here. So as I said earlier, he was very flat-footed. His feet, don't get me wrong, he was never Pernell Whitaker, but he did have quick feet. I'm not saying he had good footwork, don't get that twisted, but he had quick feet. There is a difference, which a lot of people seem to get conflated. Wilder could cover ground very, very quickly, particularly when he was throwing that right hand in his prime. You go and look at some of his, highlight reel knockouts, he'll throw a punch from the outside, the guy's hurt, and then he jumps in. Wilder was not doing that. Wilder's feet looked like he was stuck in concrete. He looked exceptionally slow. And his hands also looked slow. That was the other thing, is that he was throwing his jab, and his jab was kind of okay. As I said, it got him through the fight. His jab was okay. There wasn't really too much wrong with that. But the right hand coming behind it had nowhere near the velocity that it used to have. And that's a problem, because that's, of course, his main weapon. One thing he kept doing was he was kind of throwing this awkward arced right hand that I've not seen him really throw before. I don't know if that's because he's struggling to get the right hand off, but Wilder used to throw a straight down the pipe right hand, which is what would do the damage, and he just seemed to struggle to get that off as much as he used to. In this fight, again, he was throwing this sort of awkward looking sort of curved right hand that was almost cuffing at times. And the other thing that was concerning was, I know he was being given movement by Herndon, but he didn't, to me, look like he had the same confidence in throwing the right hand, and that has been something we saw, of course, against Zhang. That's something, of course, we saw against Parker as well, that he just doesn't seem to have the confidence to let the right hand go. And the same was true of this in the Herndon fight. When he did let the right hand go, you can go back and watch the fight and you'll see what I'm saying. It's kind of almost a don't hit me punch kind of thing, and this awkward curved right hand, rather than the straight down the pipe that we're used to seeing. So yes, he did let the right hand go, but at least initially, early in the fight, only when he felt comfortable. Now, as he warmed into the fight and he realised that Herndon's gas tank was draining, he did start to let the right hand go a bit more, and he did start to throw, I say combinations, the windmilling that he's kind of used to, that we're used to seeing and that he's known for. We started to see more of that as it got deeper into the fight. But again, that was only once he was well into the mid-rounds against essentially a journeyman who was exhausted and he knew was already hurt. Prior to that, he looked very tentative, and that doesn't necessarily bode well. The other thing that stood out to me, and this has been something that other people have remarked on in other fights, in the last sort of couple of fights, but I really noticed it here as well, and that was, as Wilder's aged, of course his body mechanics have always been a little bit weird. That hasn't aged well with him. So the awkward body mechanics that Wilder has, where he's kind of almost herky-jerky and upright, but not in sort of an outboxer herky-jerky style. It's a very strange stance that Wilder holds within the ring. As he's aged, there are other things that have started to go with that. So his balance, of course, has never been good. He'll often throw himself off balance, but because he had the quick feet, he would be able to quickly pivot to stop that from, him being countered and from that, causing him issues. In this fight, he was off balance, but his feet looked slow, so he wasn't able to adjust himself. And generally speaking, those biomechanics that Wilder has, as he's aged, it just does not bode well because he just hasn't got those fundamentals to fall back on. So he was constantly off balance in this fight. He was sort of all over the sort of moving about and, trying to evade punches with his upper body movement, but not using his feet, and then his feet aren't following his body. And where he's just sort of constantly sort of discombobulated, as he's slowed down, it just looks even more awkward than it used to. And there were points in this fight where he's throwing himself off balance from punches, and it's taken him 2 or 3 seconds to sort of readjust and get himself back up on 2 legs and sort of balance properly. And against elite opposition, that's where you're going to get countered and put away, which is exactly what happened against Zhang. He tried to hit Zhang with the right hand, he left himself off balance, looked around, and before he knew it, he was flat on his back. Literally exactly that issue with the body mechanics. So, it's a difficult one. I'm not going to be one of these people who sits here and says, look, Wilder's trash, Wilder's rubbish. Wilder in his prime was a decent fighter. Limitations, he didn't have, he didn't take the fights that we wanted him to take. He wasn't a complete fighter by any means, but he was exciting. Always low volume, but that right hand, you knew it could land at any time, and that's what made him interesting. At this juncture, that right hand does seem to not be with him in the same way it was. As I said earlier, the velocity just isn't there. So it's a difficult one, as I said in a video previously, if I was someone like Wilder, I would be targeting a Chisora or somebody like that. The AJ fight will always be there. Again, people are now saying, based on that performance, AJ wipes him out in a couple of rounds. I can't say that. I'm not going to sit and say that because with all due respect, as I said last time in my last video, last time we saw AJ, he was up and down like a yo-yo. So I'm not going to sit here and say that, this is an 80-20 in AJ's favour now if he fights Wilder at this juncture, because I don't know. Because the last time we saw AJ, he looked shot and he was being bounced all over the ring. So, I don't know. I still make that a 50-50. Both of them look past their best significantly. So, again, without seeing AJ, we might see AJ, he might go in against a journeyman and get dropped multiple times, look shaky and all this kind of thing. We don't know. So I can't, in good faith, sit here and say, based on that, AJ's going to annihilate him, because I don't think that necessarily will be the case. So, where should Wilder go next? I said previously, I think someone like a Chisora or something like that, because that will give us a good yardstick. Chisora, in my opinion, is shot anyway. I think he should be able to beat Chisora at this point, even the Wilder we just saw against Herndon. So I would start somewhere like that, see how you look, and then take it from there, and then maybe take a bigger fight from there. Because, there will still be big fights for Wilder wherever he goes. So, I don't know. It's a weird one, but I don't think he's got long left in any capacity. I think he does look like a diminished force, and he's probably only got 1 or 2 fights left. So, I don't know. But what say you? You let me know. Take it easy. Thank you.